There comes a moment in life when everything stands still. The noise fades, the plans collapse, the strength you once thought you had seems insufficient. The ideas run dry. You stare at the walls of your life, walls built from disappointment, regret, delay, and silence. And in that moment, it feels like God is distant, like maybe He's forgotten you, or that maybe He's finished writing your story. But I came to declare something to your spirit. God is not done. God has not fallen asleep on your case. He has not dropped the pen. He has not walked away from the table. In fact, what you thought was silence was preparation. What you thought was rejection was redirection. What you thought was delay was divine timing. And now, right now, you're standing on the edge of a breakthrough so massive, so undeniable, so completely orchestrated by the hand of God, it's going to shock you. You see, when God moves, He doesn't move small. He doesn't shift things around quietly. He doesn't just open a door. He kicks it off the hinges. He doesn't just make a way. He creates rivers in deserts and highways in wildernesses. When God shows up, His presence is unmistakable and His power is undeniable. There's something happening behind the scenes right now that you can't see. Heaven's been working overtime. Angels have been dispatched. The battle you didn't even know you were in, God already won it. The tears you cried in private, He collected them. The prayers you thought hit the ceiling, He stored them. And now the fullness of time is upon you. God is about to do something so big it will not just answer your prayers, it will exceed them. It won't just touch your situation. It will ripple out and touch your family, your community, and generations after you. You thought you were just praying for a breakthrough. God's preparing a legacy. You were praying for rent money. He's setting up ownership. You asked Him for a job. He's birthing a purpose. You ask Him to heal your body. He's about to use your healing as a testimony that unlocks the faith of thousands. What's coming will not be ordinary. It's going to shock you because it's going to come from places you didn't expect. The people who once overlooked you will be the same ones who have to recognize God's hand on your life. The very places where you were rejected are the places God will call you back to, elevated and empowered. You've been walking through a hidden season, but what's hidden is about to be revealed. You've been faithful with little, now watch God trust you with much. When God moves like this, He breaks rules. He defies odds. He turns statistics into dust. Doctors won't understand it. Bankers won't be able to explain it. Your enemies won't be able to stop it. Your friends won't be able to take credit for it. Only God will get the glory. This is not going to be something that looks like coincidence. It will be evident that the hand of the Lord is on your life. Maybe you've been in a season of waiting. You've been standing at the edge of promise, watching other people walk into theirs. And it's been hard. You've questioned yourself. You've questioned your worth. But let me remind you, delay is not denial. God has not forgotten you. You are not behind. You are right on time for the miracle that's about to hit your life. Because when God gets ready to do something big, He often does it suddenly. Suddenly the walls of Jericho fell. Suddenly there came a sound from heaven like a mighty rushing wind. Suddenly chains broke off Paul and Silas in prison. And suddenly, yes, suddenly, your story is going to change. Don't be surprised when doors swing open without you having to knock. Don't be shocked when people who once said no come back with a yes. Don't be afraid when what used to take years happens in days. Don't question it when the phone rings, when the opportunity arises, when the healing hits, when the favor falls. Just know this is the moment God was preparing all along. You've been asking God for a sign, and this is it. This is your confirmation. This is your word in due season. You didn't find this message by accident. This is not just encouragement. It's a prophetic announcement. God is about to do something so big it'll shock you. And when He does, you'll look back and realize that every moment of struggle, Every delay, every detour was actually divinely orchestrated to bring you to this place. You'll look back and thank him for the doors he closed, for the people who left, for the job you didn't get, for the heartbreak that broke you but didn't destroy you. Because had any of that gone differently, you wouldn't be in position for what's coming now. And I promise you, what's coming is better than what's been. What's ahead is greater than what's behind. Your latter will be greater than your former. You're stepping into a season where grace will meet you at every turn. Peace will be your portion. Joy will return like a flood. Strength will rise in you again. Your voice will come back. Your dreams will be restored. And your faith will be unstoppable. It's not just about personal blessing. It's about divine purpose. God is not only blessing you for you. He's blessing you to be a blessing. He's going to use your life as evidence. People who've doubted God are about to believe because of what they see him do in you. Skeptics are going to become worshipers. Your testimony will become a tool of transformation. God's about to take your ordinary life and make it a platform for extraordinary impact. So lift your head, wipe your tears, square your shoulders. Don't you dare quit here. You've come too far. You've prayed too long. You've endured too much to stop now. Your miracle is in motion. Heaven is backing you. The King of Glory is stepping into your situation. The same God who parted the Red Sea, who raised the dead, who fed the multitudes, who shut the mouths of lions, that same God is still moving today, and he's about to move in your lives. This is a season of radical turnaround. You're not going to look like what you've been through. You're about to be unrecognizable, not because of pain, but because of the blessing. God is going to do such a transformation in your life that even your enemies won't be able to deny his power. Some of them will have to apologize. Some will ask how you did it, and your only answer will be God. You won't need to explain yourself. You won't have to fight for validation. God himself is about to vindicate you. He's about to silence every tongue that rose in judgment. He's about to put every mocker to shame. And he's going to do it not just for your sake, but for the sake of his name. Because when God puts his name on something, he finishes it. He doesn't abandon what he starts. He is faithful to complete the good work he began in you. You've been in the fire, yes. But the fire didn't destroy you. It refined you. It purified you. It prepared you. You're coming out of this stronger, wiser, and more anointed than you've ever been. Your scars are not signs of failure. They are marks of survival. And now, with every scar, with every testimony, with every ounce of faith still beating in your heart, you are ready for the overflow, ready for the restoration, ready for the expansion, ready for the blessing so big it shocks you and everyone around you, ready for God to do what only he can do. Get ready. Position your heart. Stretch your faith. Make room, because something is coming that your eyes haven't seen, your ears haven't heard, and your mind hasn't even imagined. It's bigger than a promotion, bigger than a contract, bigger than a healing, bigger than a reconciliation. It's the manifestation of his promises in your life. It's not a maybe. It's not a possibility. It's a guarantee. Because when God speaks, his word does not return void. When he decrees a thing, it shall be established. When he sets something in motion, no power in hell can stop it. You are walking into the best days of your life, and you'll know it wasn't luck. It wasn't chance. It wasn't coincidence. It was God. And the moment it hits, the only words you'll be able to say will be, I'm shocked, but I shouldn't be. He told me he would. So brace yourself. Believe boldly, pray expectantly, and live ready. Because God's about to do something so big, it'll shock you. And when he does, give him all the glory. Because he's the one who made a way when there was no way. He's the one who picked you up when no one else would. He's the one who carried you through every valley, every storm, every season. And now he's about to reward your faithfulness in a way that no one will be able to deny. God works in silence before the surprise. That truth is both challenging and comforting depending on where you are in your journey. Silence is one of the most misunderstood aspects of our relationship with God. It's easy to assume that when things are quiet, when there's no clear answer, no open door, and no change in sight, that God must be distant or disinterested. But in reality, some of God's greatest works begin in silence. His most stunning surprises are often hidden beneath stillness. Think of Joseph, the dreamer. He had a vision of leadership, influence, and favor, but almost immediately after he shared that vision, everything in his life seemed to fall apart. Betrayed by his brothers, sold into slavery, falsely accused, and thrown into prison. Joseph's story is marked by long seasons of divine silence. For years, there's no record of any grand revelation, no angelic visit, no prophetic voice confirming what he once saw in a dream. But what we don't see on the surface is what God was doing underneath. In the prison, God was developing Joseph's character. He was strengthening his discernment, building resilience, and aligning circumstances for his elevation. In the silence, God was working a setup so perfect it would shock an entire nation. One day, in a moment, Joseph went from prisoner to prime minister. It was sudden to everyone else, but not to God. That kind of suddenness is always preceded by divine silence. Or look at David, anointed king while still a young shepherd. God promised him the throne, but after the oil flowed over his head, David went back to tending sheep. Years passed. He served Saul. He hid in caves. He fought battles. But all the while, the throne remained occupied by someone else. It must have felt confusing, even discouraging. Where was the fulfillment? Where was the promise? Where was God? Yet in that quiet season, God was forging a king, not just giving him a crown. God was teaching David how to lead, how to trust, how to wait, and how to worship in the wilderness. When the time finally came for David to rule, he was ready, not because of what he gained in public, but because of what he endured in private. God's silence is not absence. His quietness is not neglect. In fact, it is often in the quiet seasons that God is the most attentive. Like a gardener tending to roots before the fruit appears, God works in the unseen places of your life, where no one claps, where no one notices, and where only faith can survive. He is forming things in you that will sustain the weight of what's coming next. The problem is, we often want the outcome without the formation. We want the crown without the cave. But God knows that sudden elevation without silent preparation leads to collapse. So when you find yourself in a silent season, don't rush it, don't despise it, don't assume that God has forgotten you. Instead, shift your perspective. What if this silence is sacred? What if it's divine? What if it's the very proof that God is doing something far deeper than you realize? Some of the most beautiful masterpieces are crafted in hidden workshops. Some of the strongest trees grow silently for years before they break the surface. Likewise, God is doing something in you that requires silence, because when the surprise comes, when the door is open and the promise is fulfilled, you'll look back and realize the silence was never empty. It was full of purpose. You might not hear him now. You might not see anything changing, but trust this, God is not idle. He's working, he's aligning, he's shifting, he's preparing not just the blessing for you, but you for the blessing. And when it finally breaks through, when the silence gives way to the sound of answered prayer, it will be so sudden, so stunning, so supernatural that it will make sense why you had to wait. You'll understand why it had to take time. You'll see that nothing was wasted, not a moment, not a tear, not a prayer. It was all part of the setup. When God moves, he moves suddenly. There is something deeply profound about the way God operates in our lives that often defies our human understanding. We live in a world where we like to prepare, plan, and expect things to unfold gradually, with plenty of warning signs along the way. We expect to see the pieces fall into place, to receive a gradual buildup that leads to the big moment. But with God, things don't always follow that script. Sometimes He moves in such a way that it feels like everything changes in an instant, suddenly, unexpectedly, and powerfully. Think about the times in Scripture when God's interventions didn't come with advanced warning. The children of Israel had been slaves in Egypt for generations, and despite God's promises, they had no reason to believe their situation would change anytime soon. Their cries for freedom had gone unanswered for hundreds of years. Then, in one encounter at the burning bush, God called Moses to lead them out. What followed was nothing short of a divine intervention, a sudden and dramatic change in the course of history. Moses, initially hesitant, was thrust into a role he never asked for, leading millions of people out of bondage and into the wilderness. The suddenness of God's movement was both a surprise and a shock to everyone involved. Consider the story of Paul and Silas in the prison. They had been falsely accused, beaten, and thrown into the inner cell of the prison. The odds of their release seemed impossible. They had no way of knowing how or when they would be freed. Yet, in the middle of the night, while they were praying and singing hymns to God, suddenly there was a violent earthquake that shook the foundations of the prison. The doors flew open, and their chains came loose. What seemed like an impossible situation, something they couldn't have planned for or foreseen, was suddenly reversed by the power of God. The suddenness of this divine move not only freed them physically, but also brought salvation to the jailer and his household. In an instant, everything changed. In your own life, the suddenness of God's movement may be just around the corner. You might be waiting for a breakthrough in your finances, relationships, or health, and everything may seem stagnant. You might be praying, fasting, and believing, but it feels as though nothing is shifting. But I want to encourage you today that the very moment you least expect it, God can move suddenly. It may feel like you've been in a season of waiting for a long time, but God has a way of changing everything in an instant when His time is perfect. Suddenness doesn't mean randomness, though. While it may seem like things have been silent or stagnant for a while, God is always working behind the scenes. He doesn't operate on our timeline, but He operates perfectly within His own. The Scripture says that with God, a day is like 1,000 years, and 1,000 years is like a day. So while you may feel like you've been waiting forever, to God, the moment of your breakthrough is right on time. It will come when it's most strategic, when it will have the greatest impact, and when you are most prepared to receive it. But the key to experiencing this sudden movement of God is expectation. When nothing looks different today, you need to keep your heart open and your faith strong, because everything can change tomorrow. Even though you can't see the path, God is paving the way. Even though you don't know how, God knows exactly what to do and when to do it. Our job is to remain expectant and faithful, trusting that the sudden shift will come at just the right moment. The waiting period is never wasted. It's in those quiet, seemingly uneventful seasons that God is building your faith, deepening your trust, and preparing you for the moment of divine intervention. It's important to remember that God's sudden move is often not about what He does for you, but also about what He does in you. For example, the Israelites were delivered from Egypt, but the journey that followed was a process of transformation. God had to prepare their hearts for the promised land. Similarly, when God moves suddenly in your life, He might be moving you out of one situation, but the true purpose of that suddenness is the transformation He's working within you. The circumstances are just the outward manifestation of a much deeper work that He is doing in your heart. You see, God's sudden moves are not arbitrary. They are intentional and purposeful. Just as in the case of the Israelites or Paul and Silas, God's sudden movements are not random acts of power. They are signs of His perfect will being worked out in our lives. the timing, the method, the circumstances. They are all part of his divine plan. And when God moves suddenly, we have no choice but to acknowledge that it was him. There is no one else who could have done it. There is no other explanation for it. Only God could have moved in such a way. So if you find yourself in a season of waiting, don't lose hope. Don't give in to discouragement. God is working behind the scenes. Even when it seems like nothing is changing, God is orchestrating a moment that will blow your mind. It could be a job offer you never saw coming, a healing that seems impossible, a relationship restored out of nowhere, or a financial breakthrough that feels like it came from another world. Whatever it is, remember this: God doesn't need advance notice to move in your life. He can change everything in a moment, in the blink of an eye. Stay expectant, stay faithful. Even when it feels like the world is standing still, know that God is working. The season of suddenness is coming, and when it hits, you'll look back and marvel at how quickly everything shifted. You'll realize that the years of waiting, the days of silence, and the moments of frustration were all part of the divine preparation for that sudden breakthrough. And when it happens, it will be so clear that it was only God who could have done it. His sudden move will glorify him and testify to his power in ways that nothing else could. So hold on, stay in faith. When God moves, he moves subtly, and when he does, it will be worth the wait. Keep trusting, keep believing, and know that everything can change tomorrow. God's blessing doesn't just meet our expectations, it exceeds them in ways that often leave us speechless. So many times we find ourselves praying, hoping, and asking God for specific things, prayers that seem reasonable and even aligned with his will. Yet when his answers come, they are far beyond what we could have imagined. It's as if God takes our small, limited requests and turns them into something far grander, far more expansive, and far more powerful than we could have ever envisioned. This is the nature of God's generosity. He isn't bound by our expectations. He doesn't just give us what we ask for. He gives us what we need, and often that's more than we even know to ask for. We may be asking God for a little breakthrough, a small win, a minor improvement in our lives, and yet God is preparing to release something far bigger, something that will impact not just us, but those around us and even future generations. Think about the story of Solomon, the son of David. When God appeared to Solomon in a dream and asked him what he wanted, Solomon could have asked for anything. He could have requested wealth, power, fame, or victory over his enemies. But instead, he asked for wisdom to be able to lead God's people with understanding. Solomon's request wasn't small, but it was certainly specific. God's response, however, exceeded even Solomon's wisest expectations. Not only did God give him the wisdom he asked for, but he also gave him wealth, honor, and peace, a promise of prosperity and legacy that would surpass that of all the kings before him. Solomon asked for wisdom, but God blessed him with far more than that. God's blessings far exceeded his request, and the result was not just for Solomon's good, but for the entire nation. This pattern of God exceeding expectations is not just reserved for kings or figures in the Bible, it's part of his nature. He delights in surprising us with his goodness, going above and beyond to show us how deep his love and provision are. Sometimes we limit our prayers to what we think we need or what we feel is achievable within our human capacity. But God's resources are limitless, and his plans for us are always bigger than the boxes we try to put him in. Take the story of the widow in 2 Kings 4. She was in deep need. Her husband had died, and she was left with nothing but debt that she couldn't pay. The prophet Elisha asked her what she had in her house, and all she could offer was a small jar of oil. But Elisha instructed her to gather as many jars as possible, telling her to pour the little oil she had into them. The result was nothing short of miraculous. The oil didn't just fill 1 or 2 jars, it filled every jar she could find. When there were no more jars left, the oil stopped flowing. What started as a single, seemingly insignificant jar of oil became enough to pay off her debts and provide for her future. This story exemplifies how God's blessings go beyond our expectations. The widow's faithfulness in following the prophet's instructions turned a small, seemingly hopeless situation into one of abundance. She didn't ask for an overflow of oil, she only asked for enough to get by, but God provided far more than she could have imagined. In fact, her blessing overflowed and she was able to live on the abundance God provided. It's easy to fall into the trap of limiting God's blessing to what we see with our eyes or what we think is possible in our own strength. But God sees the bigger picture. What you're asking for, no matter how good or necessary it may seem, is small in comparison to what He wants to give you. You may ask for a door to open in your career or your relationships, but God is preparing to open not just a door, but a whole new world of opportunities. You may ask God for a season of survival, but God is about to release an abundance so great that it overflows into the lives of those around you. Think about the boy who brought 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish to Jesus. In the natural, this was barely enough to feed a few people, let alone a crowd of 5,000 men, plus women and children. But Jesus took that small offering, blessed it, and miraculously multiplied it to feed everyone. And there were still 12 baskets of leftovers. The boy's small lunch was not enough for the crowd, but Jesus turned that small offering into an overflow. This is a powerful reminder that God can take what little we have and multiply it exponentially. What we bring to Him may seem insignificant, but when placed in the hands of God, it becomes more than enough. Perhaps you've been praying for something in your life, and it feels like God isn't answering the way you expected. Maybe you've asked for provision, but it hasn't arrived in the form you anticipated. Maybe you've asked for a breakthrough, but things still seem stagnant. Take heart, because what God is preparing for you is far greater than what you could imagine. God is not just concerned with meeting your needs, He is about to exceed them. What you thought was enough is about to become more than enough. This principle is not limited to physical needs alone. God's blessings also extend to our spiritual growth, our relationships, and our capacity for joy. You may have been asking for peace in your heart, and God is preparing to give you peace that surpasses all understanding. You may have been asking for reconciliation with someone you've been estranged from, but God is not just going to restore that relationship. He's going to strengthen it in ways that you never thought possible. You may have been praying for patience, but God is preparing to flood your life with an abundant joy that transforms your entire outlook. God doesn't just want to meet your expectations, He wants to exceed them. His blessings are always more than we deserve, more than we can comprehend, and more than we ask for. So when you pray, don't limit God to what you think you need. Open your heart to the reality that He wants to bless you abundantly, to do far more than you could ever ask or imagine. God's blessings exceed expectation, and they are always greater, grander, and more glorious than anything you could have imagined on your own. So keep believing, keep trusting, keep praying. God is not just answering your prayers, He is preparing to exceed them in ways that will leave you in awe of His goodness and grace. Your struggle was preparation, not punishment. This truth can often be difficult to grasp, especially when we find ourselves in the midst of pain, disappointment, and adversity. When life feels overwhelming and our circumstances seem to be conspiring against us, it's natural to question why things are happening the way they are. In those moments, it can feel like everything we've gone through, the loss, the pain, the betrayal, the delays, was meant to break us, to crush our spirits, and to leave us in pieces. But the reality is that what you are going through is not meant to destroy you. It is meant to prepare you for something greater. God doesn't waste a single struggle. Every heartache, every challenge, every season of suffering is part of His refining process. Just as gold must pass through fire to become pure, our faith must go through trials to become strong and unshakable. The things we face are not arbitrary, random hardships. They are opportunities for growth, lessons in the making, and part of God's divine preparation for what is to come. Think about a gardener pruning a tree. When a branch is cut back, it can appear harsh and painful. The tree might look smaller, weaker, or even wounded. But the pruning process is necessary for the tree to grow stronger and bear more fruit. Without pruning, the tree would become overgrown, weak, and unproductive. The gardener knows this, which is why the pruning is not a punishment but a necessary step toward the tree's future flourishing. In the same way, God prunes our lives, removing the dead weight, the unnecessary baggage, and the things that would hold us back from our true potential. The story of Joseph in the Bible is a perfect example of how God uses struggle for preparation. Joseph was the favored son of Jacob, and he had dreams of greatness. But instead of seeing his dreams unfold smoothly, he was betrayed by his brothers, sold into slavery, falsely accused, and thrown into prison. For many years, Joseph's life seemed to be a series of devastating setbacks. It could have been easy for him to see all of this as punishment, or to become bitter and angry at the world. But what Joseph couldn't see in the moment was that every painful experience, every unfair circumstance was preparing him for his destiny. God was using the prison to refine his leadership, his character, and his trust in him. Those dark years of struggle were not random. They were a part of God's perfect plan to position Joseph to one day save an entire nation from famine. Similarly, consider the story of David. David was anointed king as a young man, but instead of immediately stepping into the palace, he spent years fleeing from Saul, living in caves and facing constant danger. David's anointing was clear, but his path to the throne was filled with hardship. There were moments of intense loneliness, moments of fear, and moments when it seemed as if God had forgotten his promise. Yet in each of those moments, God was preparing David's heart for the kingship. He was teaching David how to lead with humility, how to trust God in the face of overwhelming odds, and how to worship with authenticity in the wilderness. David's time in the desert wasn't punishment, it was preparation. The struggles he faced were the very things that shaped him into the leader he would become. In our own lives, it's easy to feel that our struggles are somehow punitive. We may ask, why is this happening to me? Or what did I do wrong? It can feel like the pain we're experiencing is the consequence of our mistakes, our failures, or even our past decisions. While it's true that some consequences come from our own choices, it's also true that not every struggle is a punishment. God allows us to go through tough times, not to harm us, but to build us. He refines us in the fire so that we can become more resilient, more compassionate, and more Christ-like. He prunes us before he promotes us, ensuring that we are prepared to carry the weight of the blessings he is about to release. Even in the moments when you feel betrayed, remember that God is using those situations to teach you something vital. Betrayal is never easy, but it can be a powerful teacher. It teaches you to discern the hearts of others, to forgive, and to trust God more deeply. Loss, too, can be a difficult teacher, but through it you learn to rely on God as your ultimate source of comfort and strength. Pain stretches your capacity for empathy and compassion. It opens your heart to the needs of others and deepens your understanding of God's grace. Every painful chapter of your story is making you into the person God is calling you to be. God never wastes a struggle. The painful moments that you're experiencing right now are not the end of your story. They are part of the larger narrative he is writing for you. What seems like a setback today may be the very thing that sets you up for your future breakthrough. The things you have endured, the things that have broken your heart, the things that have caused you to question your purpose, all of these are being used by God to refine you, to teach you, and to prepare you for the next season. You may not understand everything you're going through right now. You may wonder why you're facing such overwhelming difficulties, and you may feel like you've been abandoned or forgotten. But know this: God has not forsaken you. What you see as pain, he sees as purpose. What you see as a struggle, he sees as the forging of your destiny, and what was meant for harm, God is turning around for your good. Just as he did with Joseph, just as he did with David, he is working in the background to bring about something greater than you can imagine. So take heart. Trust that the struggles you are facing are not punishments, but opportunities for growth and preparation. God is using everything in your life, the good, the bad, the ugly, to refine you, shape you, and prepare you for what's ahead. His plans for you are bigger than the pain you are experiencing, and in the end, his purpose will prevail. Keep your eyes on the bigger picture and know that God is with you, even in the fire, working all things together for your good. The shock will glorify God, not you. This truth often comes as a reminder when we are waiting for a breakthrough, an answer to prayer, or a shift in our circumstances. It's easy to fall into the trap of thinking that the blessing or miracle we're praying for will somehow bring us glory, recognition, or honor. But God's ways are far higher than ours, and his plans go far beyond what we can comprehend. When God moves in your life, it won't just be a small shift or a subtle change. His move will be so big, so undeniable, so outside the realm of human possibility that only he can get the credit. You won't be able to boast in your own strength, wisdom, or timing, because it will be clear to everyone this was the work of God alone. Think about the story of the Israelites crossing the Red Sea. After years of slavery in Egypt, they were finally freed, but Pharaoh's army was pursuing them. Trapped between the sea and the soldiers, it seemed like all hope was lost. But God told Moses to stretch out his hand, and he parted the sea, allowing the Israelites to walk through on dry ground. When the army tried to follow, the waters crashed down upon them, and the entire Egyptian force was destroyed. In that moment, the Israelites couldn't take credit for the deliverance. No one could say we escaped because we were strong enough, smart enough, or fast enough. The power of God was so evident, so tangible, that everyone knew it was his intervention. It was his hand that parted the sea. It was his might that destroyed their enemies. And in the end, it was his name that was glorified. The same principle applies to our own lives. When God moves on our behalf, the size of what's coming may not make sense logically. It might defy reason. It might go against all the odds. And it might be so far beyond our own abilities that it seems almost absurd. But that's exactly the point. God moves in ways that remind us who is truly in control. His plans for us are always larger than we can imagine, and his power is limitless. What he is about to do in your life won't fit within the constraints of human understanding. It will stretch the boundaries of your imagination, and in the end, no person, no system, no coincidence will be able to take credit for what God has done. Think about the story of Gideon, a man who was called by God to deliver Israel from the oppression of the Midianites. When God first called Gideon, he was hiding in a wine press, fearful and uncertain. But God saw something in him that Gideon couldn't see in himself. God saw a warrior. However, when God began to assemble an army to fight the Midianites, he told Gideon that he had too many soldiers. The Lord said that if they defeated the Midianites with such a large army, Israel would boast, saying, "My own hand has delivered me." God knew that if the victory came too easily, Israel might credit their strength, strategy, or numbers instead of God's power. So he reduced Gideon's army from 32,000 to just 300 men. With only 300 men, the Israelites went into battle, and God caused the Midianites to turn on each other in confusion. The victory was so miraculous that no one could take credit but God himself. It was clear to everyone involved that it was his power and not their own that had brought about the victory. This is the way God works. When he moves in your life, he will make sure that the outcome cannot be explained by your efforts, your intelligence, or your resources. No one will be able to say, "I did this. I made this happen." No human being will be able to take the credit for what God is about to do in your life. His power will be undeniable, His glory will be evident, and His name will be lifted high. We often think that for something to be valuable or meaningful, we must somehow earn it, prove ourselves worthy, or make it happen through our own strength. But God's glory isn't about our ability to pull things off. It's about His ability to make the impossible possible. When He steps in, everything changes. And when He moves in your life in such a way that no one can take the credit, it becomes a testimony of His greatness and power. It becomes a beacon that points others to Him. And that is the ultimate purpose of His work in our lives. In the New Testament, we see this pattern again. The Apostle Paul, a man who once persecuted Christians, had his life radically transformed on the road to Damascus. When he encountered Jesus, everything about him changed. He went from being a fierce enemy of the gospel to one of its greatest proponents. However, Paul often emphasized that his transformation wasn't by his own effort. It was a result of God's grace and power. He was aware that the extraordinary nature of his story wasn't about him. It was about what God had done in him. In 2 Corinthians 12:9, Paul writes that God told him, "My grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness." It was in Paul's weakness that God's power was most evident. His life became a living testimony that God does His greatest work when we are at our weakest. God's work in your life will always be about His glory, not yours. When the miracle happens, when the breakthrough comes, when the unexpected doors open, it won't be because you were able to make it happen. It will be because God is showing up in a way that can only be explained by His power. He will orchestrate events, open doors, and shift circumstances in such a way that no one, not even you, will be able to take credit for it. The shock of it all will be a reminder that God is in control, that He is bigger than your circumstances, and that His plans for you are far greater than anything you could have achieved on your own. So as you wait for God to move, remember this: what's coming will be bigger than you think. And when it happens, you won't be able to take the credit. The glory will belong to God alone. His power will be undeniable, and His name will be exalted above all else. Keep trusting, keep believing, and keep your eyes open, because when God moves, it will be in such a way that all you can do is stand in awe of His greatness. You must prepare for what you prayed for. It's easy to get caught up in the excitement of believing that God will answer our prayers. We pray, we wait, and we expect that God will do something amazing in our lives. But faith is not just a passive state of waiting. It's an active posture, a readiness to receive what God has promised. If you believe that God is about to do something big, it's time to start acting like it. Preparation isn't just about making physical space for what you've asked for. It's about mentally, emotionally, and spiritually making room for the blessing that's on its way. The Bible is filled with examples of people who were given promises by God, and their ability to receive those promises was directly linked to their preparation. Take the story of the Israelites as they journeyed through the desert toward the promised land. God had already promised them a land flowing with milk and honey, but it was their responsibility to prepare to enter that land. When they finally reached the Jordan River, they didn't simply stand there waiting for God to part the waters. They had to act. They had to step out in faith, first into the river before the waters would be parted. God wasn't going to do everything for them. He required them to prepare themselves through action, obedience, and trust in His timing. Similarly, when God promised Abraham that he would become the father of many nations, Abraham had to actively believe that promise, even when it seemed impossible. He had to prepare his life, his mindset, and his family for a future he couldn't see. God didn't just tell Abraham that He would make him the father of many nations and leave it at that. Abraham had to act. He had to leave his home, step into the unknown, and be willing to do whatever it took to embrace God's plan. And while he didn't see the fulfillment of that promise immediately, he lived in expectation, preparing for what was to come. In the same way, God has called us to prepare for the answers to our prayers. If you believe God is about to bring a breakthrough in your career, start preparing for that promotion. Begin developing the skills and the mindset of someone who is already walking in that new role. If you've been praying for a new home, start making space in your heart and in your home for what you are asking for. If you're praying for a relationship to be restored or a new relationship to blossom, begin preparing your heart to love, forgive, and accept someone new in your life. Faith without action is dead. If you truly believe that God is moving on your behalf, your actions should reflect that belief. One of the most profound ways we prepare for what we pray for is by making room in our hearts. We often pray for blessings, but our hearts can be cluttered with fear, doubt, unforgiveness, or unresolved issues from the past. Before God can release what we've been asking for, we need to make sure that our hearts are in a position to receive it. This means letting go of old hurts, releasing bitterness, and preparing to embrace the new thing God is about to do. If we're holding on to the past, we can't fully step into the future God has for us. Our hearts need to be open, expectant, and free from the weight of previous disappointments or failures. In addition to preparing our hearts, we must also prepare our spaces. Think of the story of the widow in 2 Kings 4. She was in debt, and the prophet Elisha instructed her to gather as many empty vessels as she could find. She did so, and when she began pouring